The Galactic Council chamber aboard Sirius Prime was eerily silent as the decision was made. The 12 council members, a collection of the most influential beings in the known galaxy, sat in their respective seats, their forms flickering in the dim blue light of the holographic display. At the center of the vast circular hall was an image of Earth, its continents obscured by thick clouds of smoke, its cities nothing more than flickering embers in the wake of relentless orbital bombardment. The air was heavy with something that not even the vacuum of space could silence defeat. At the head of the chamber, High Arbiter Relland stood motionless, his cybernetic frame gleaming under the artificial glow. His face, a smooth, expressionless metal mask, revealed nothing of the thoughts lurking beneath his synthetic mind. He was not a creature of passion or sentiment. He was a being of cold calculation, of pragmatism. And in his mind, the answer had been clear long before the council had gathered. The invasion is inevitable, Relland stated, his voice ringing across the chamber, mechanical yet carrying the weight of finality. The Shellcar Dominion has deemed Earth a strategic outpost. Resistance will only prolong the suffering of its inhabitants. Surrender is the only logical course. There was a murmur of unease among the council members. Some shifted in their seats, others cast worried glances at the single human standing among them. Ambassador Thea Lorne, humanity's last voice in this so-called Galactic Union, did not flinch. She was weary, her face hollow from endless days of failed negotiations, her dark uniform still stained with the soot of burning cities. But exhaustion had not dulled the fire in her eyes. Surrender? She repeated, her voice hoarse yet unwavering. You speak of surrender as if it is yours to offer. But Earth is not a prize to be bargained away in this chamber. You do not live there. You do not fight there. It is my people who bleed, not you. Counselor Veen, a gelatinous being from the water world of Ishvard, quivered under her gaze. Ambassador, I understand your emotions, but we must be realistic. The Dominion's fleet outnumbers Earth's defenses 100 to 1. Their soldiers are genetically engineered for war. If we refuse their terms, they will respond with eradication. Then we fight to the last, Thea snapped. We fight because we must, because the alternative is servitude, or worse. A slow clicking noise filled the chamber. Chancellor Shiroth, a towering Zephyrian with translucent wings, rubbed his serrated mandibles together in a gesture of skepticism. Your people's courage is admirable, but courage alone does not win wars, Ambassador. Strategy does. And the Council has determined the best course of action. The best course of action for whom? Thea shot back, stepping forward, her boots echoing across the metallic floor. For the billions of humans who will die as slaves. For the children who will never see the sun because your council deemed them expendable. Tell me, what deal did you strike with the Dominion? What assurances did they give you in exchange for our world? There was a pause, an unspoken admission of guilt. Thea's hands clenched into fists. They will not stop with Earth, she hissed. You believe they will take our planet and be satisfied? That they will honor your pitiful treaties? You are not dealing with diplomats. You are dealing with conquerors. They do not negotiate, they consume. A low hymn filled the chamber as Relland's cybernetic eyes flickered. We have considered the risks, he said. But this is not just about Earth. The Dominion has already conquered 3 systems beyond the Veil Expanse. If we resist, the war will spread beyond one planet. It will consume the entire Union. Thea's breath caught in her throat. So that's it then, she whispered. You are sacrificing us to buy yourselves time. Relland did not answer. The finality of it hit her harder than any explosion, any gunshot, any scream of the dying. The Council had abandoned them. Earth was lost. The transmission of surrender was set within the hour. And the Dominion wasted no time. The Shellcar did not honor the terms. Their warships lingered in Earth's skies long after the final guns fell silent. The surrender had been meaningless, just words, weak words spoken by cowards in a distant station who had never understood the nature of their enemy. The Dominion's forces swept across the planet, methodical in their destruction. Cities were reduced to husks of ash and twisted metal. Survivors were rounded up, marked, categorized. Some were taken for labor to fuel the Dominion's unending expansion. Others were taken for study, subjected to experiments that twisted their forms, hollowed their minds. The lucky ones simply perished. And yet, through the ruin, resistance smoldered. Thea Lorne had been captured in the initial wave, imprisoned aboard a Dominion dreadnought, a trophy of their victory. But Earth had not given up on her. A desperate raid, carried out by the remnants of Earth's surviving fleet, had shattered the Dominion's grip, just long enough for Thea to escape. And now she was back where it all began. Back on Sirius Prime, The council had reconvened, not in confidence, but in terror. Thea stepped into the chamber, her presence no longer that of a diplomat, but of a soldier. The once imposing figures of the council now looked small, hollowed by fear. The Dominion had turned its gaze beyond Earth. Their warships had begun their march across the stars, and the worlds that had once betrayed Earth now faced the same fate. Veen was the first to speak. His gelatinous body trembled violently. "Ambassador Lorne, please." "Don't!" Thea's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Do not call me that. I am not here to negotiate." Straw's wings twitched. "We did what we thought was best," he croaked. "And now your worlds burn for it." Thea's eyes were cold, distant. The Dominion never wanted Earth. They wanted a foothold, a test. They wanted to see if you would break. And you did. Now they know how weak you are. Relin, the once imposing arbiter, was silent. His cybernetic frame, once pristine, now showed signs of wear, his artificial mind strained by the weight of failure. Thea stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could have fought," she said. "You could have stood with us. But instead, you surrendered." Relin finally spoke, his voice slow, hollow. There was logic in the decision. "There is no logic in cowardice." The chamber was silent. They looked at them, these beings who had once thought themselves untouchable, these rulers of the stars who had condemned her people. Now they were nothing. The Dominion had seen to that. One by one, their homeworlds had fallen. One by one, their proud civilizations had been reduced to echoes. Relon's synthetic eyes flickered. What will you do?" They had turned away. Outside, the resistance fleet was gathering, humans, defectors, refugees from fallen worlds. The fight was far from over. "You were once the greatest power in the galaxy," she said softly. "Now you are just a warning." Relon's voice crackled. "A warning against what?" Thea paused at the threshold of the chamber. "Against people like you." And with that, she left them to fade into obscurity. As humanity rose from the ashes to reclaim what had been stolen, the flames of Earth had long since died, but their embers still burned in the hearts of those who had survived. For years after the surrender, humanity scattered, fragmented into hidden enclaves among the stars. Some had fled to the asteroid colonies, burrowing into rock and ice, carving out whatever existence they could. Others had been taken enslaved, experimented on, broken by the Selkar Dominion's insatiable hunger. The rest had died, their bodies turned to ash beneath the weight of orbital bombardments. But humanity was not extinct, not yet. Thea Lorne had spent those years in exile, her name whispered among survivors as both legend and ghost. She had escaped the Dominion's grasp, evaded their hunters, built the foundations of a resistance from nothing but desperation and fury. She had watched as the Dominion turned its gaze outward, moving beyond Earth, spreading across the fragile peace the Galactic Council had once claimed to uphold. The Council itself had collapsed in the wake of Earth's fall. The same leaders who had spoken of surrender as a necessity had found themselves facing the same choice. And one by one, their worlds burned. Just as Earth had burned, the Zephyrian homeworld of Koska was the first to fall, its once glittering spires reduced to molten slag. The amphibious Valaria of Quintos had fought to the last breath, their oceans running black with Dominion blood, but they had fallen all the same. The Dominion was methodical, patient, ruthless. It did not matter if a species surrendered or fought. Their fate was already written. Now there was nothing left of the Council but a few stragglers, refugees adrift in the remnants of their own hubris. And Thea had come back to remind them of their failure. She stepped onto the surface of Seraphis Prime, a dead station orbiting the ruins of what had once been a thriving galactic capital. The lights of the docking bay flickered weakly, struggling to maintain power in a station long since abandoned by its former occupants. The halls were eerily silent, stripped of the bustling diplomats and traders who had once walked them. The air smelled of rust and stale oxygen. Ahead of her, the last remnants of the Council awaited. She had not come alone. Behind her, figures moved in the shadows, survivors, fighters, remnants of a species that refused to die. Some had once been soldiers of Earth, their uniforms now faded relics of a world that no longer existed. Others had been prisoners, freed from Dominion labor camps, their bodies scarred but their eyes burning with the same defiance that had kept humanity alive. They did not speak as Thea entered the chamber. They did not need to. The Council was already waiting. Relin was still there, though he no longer resembled the imposing figure he had once been. His cybernetic body had deteriorated, his once polished exoskeleton dulled and corroded by time and neglect. His synthetic eyes flickered weakly, struggling to maintain power. He did not stand as Thea approached, but she could see the way his fingers twitched, the smallest tell of unease. Beside him, Counselor Veen was a trembling mass of quivering flesh, his once vibrant bioluminescence dimmed to a sickly glow. The loss of his homeworld had left him broken, his people scattered into the void, their once great civilization reduced to drifting vessels and dying embers. Chancellor Shiroth stood as well, but he was no longer proud. His wings hung limply against his back, his exoskeleton cracked, his compound eyes clouded with exhaustion. The Zephyrians had fought in the end. They had tried to resist the tide they had once believed could be controlled. But resistance had come too late. Koska was gone. The others were missing, dead or fled. No Grand Council remained, no galaxy-spanning union to enforce its rule. Just ghosts clinging to the illusion of power. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Thea stepped forward, her boots on the floor with slow, deliberate force. How does it feel, she asked, her voice quiet, yet cutting through the silence like a blade, to be on the other side? Relin did not answer. She studied him, this once mighty arbiter who had spoken of logic, of necessity, of the inevitability of surrender. He had sat in this chamber and condemned her people to death with a flicker of his artificial voice. And now he was nothing. I warned you, she continued. I told you they wouldn't stop. I told you that surrender would not save us. And yet you still sent that message. You still handed Earth over as if it were a bargaining chip in a game you never truly understood. Veen shuddered. We thought. You thought wrong. Thea interrupted. Shiroth let out a slow, rattling exhale. You came here for a reason, he rasped. Say what you came to say. She tilted her head slightly. You assume I came to speak. I didn't. I came to offer you something you never offered us. For a brief moment, something flickered in Relin's failing optics, a sliver of hope, of belief that perhaps even now they could bargain for survival. Thea smiled, but there was no warmth in it. A chance, she said, to fight. The room was silent. Relin's fingers twitched again. You would have us fight. You don't have a choice, Thea replied. Your worlds are gone. Your power is meaningless. The Dominion will find you eventually, just as they found us. And when they do, they will not ask for your surrender. They will do to you what they have done to everyone else. Shiroth's wings fluttered weakly. What are you proposing? She gestured to the figures behind her, the remnants of humanity's last warriors. We are not done, she said. Earth may be lost, but humanity is not. The resistance grows every day. We are no longer just soldiers of a dead world. We are survivors of many worlds. And we are done running. Relin's optics flickered. You would have us join you. No, Thea said coldly. You don't deserve that. Veen let out a wheezing sound somewhere between a breath and a whimper. Then what? I am offering you a purpose, she said. Because if you have nothing left, then you can still make yourselves useful. You can still make up for what you did. Relin hesitated. I don't expect you to fight for us, she continued. You've already proven that you are cowards. But cowards still have value. You know the Dominion. You know their strategies, their tactics, their weaknesses. You sat in those chambers speaking to their envoys, making deals with them. Now you will help us undo the damage you caused. Shiroth let out a slow hiss. And if we refuse? Thea's expression did not change. Then you will die here, just like you left us to die. Silence. She could see it in their faces, the understanding, the slow, creeping realization that this was not a negotiation. It never had been. They had lost the right to negotiate the moment they had surrendered Earth. Relin exhaled, his synthetic voice crackling. And if we help you? Thea took a step closer, leaning in, her voice lowering to a whisper. Then maybe, she said, history will remember you as something more than a warning. She turned, walking away, her soldiers following in silence. The Council had spent years believing that surrender was the only path to survival. Now they would learn the truth. Now they would fight. Not because they were brave, but because they had no other choice. The cold void of space stretched endlessly beyond the viewing port, the distant light of dying stars flickering like silent witnesses to the mistakes of those who had almost ruled this part of the galaxy. Seraphis Prime, once a beacon of unity and governance, now hung in low orbit above a world that no longer mattered, a drifting relic of a broken empire. The Galactic Council was dead in all but name, its members scattered, its authority reduced to nothing more than memories and regret. For years, Thealorn had dreamt of returning here, standing in the very chamber where her people had been betrayed, where Earth's fate had been signed away by beings who had convinced themselves they were wise. But now that she was here, she felt nothing. No satisfaction, no catharsis, only the same cold determination that had driven her since the day she had lost everything. Behind her, the remnants of the once mighty council sat in silence. Relin, the once imposing cybernetic arbiter, now barely functional, his internal systems flickering from years of decay. Sroth, the once proud Zephyrian chancellor, his wings tattered, his exoskeleton dull and cracked. Veen, the Volari diplomat, reduced to a quivering, shriveled form of what he had once been. The others were gone, either dead or scattered to the void. She had given them a choice. Now she was here for their answer. Relin's voice, once smooth and calculated, now crackled with the strain of failing servos. You expect us to help you wage war against the Dominion? Thea met his gaze unflinching. No, I expect you to give us something worth the lives you cost us. Shuros' mandibles clicked together in irritation. You need us, he rasped. Otherwise you would have let us die here? I don't need you, Thea said, her voice cold. I need what you know. She stepped forward, the dim glow of emergency lights casting long shadows across the chamber. You spent years working with the Dominion. You made treaties, you brokered deals. You know their fleet movements, their supply lines, their weak points. She gestured to the space beyond the station, to the stars that now belonged to their enemy. You spent so long trying to appease them that you probably know more about them than anyone who has ever fought them. Veen's gelatinous body quivered. If we had known their full intent. Don't! Thea cut him off sharply. Don't pretend you didn't know what they were. You chose to believe the lies because it was easier than fighting. And now you're seeing what that cost you. She let her gaze sweep over them, taking in their ragged forms, the hollow look in their eyes. Every world you try to protect by surrendering, gone every species you convinced to bow their heads, wiped out. And now you sit here, ghosts of a dead council, wondering if you can bargain your way out of extinction. Relin's fingers twitched, a subconscious remnant of his once precise movements. And if we give you what you want, then you will have finally done something useful. Thea said simply. Shuros' mandibles clicked again. And then what? Once we have given you all that we know. Thea let the question hang in the air for a moment. She knew what he was really asking. Would she let them live? Did they still have a place in this war, in this galaxy? Could they be more than a cautionary tale? You want to know if there's redemption for you, she said, her voice quieter now. If there's some way for you to come back from what you've done. No one answered. She let the silence stretch between them. The truth is, I don't know, she admitted. I don't know if the galaxy will ever forgive you. I don't know if history will remember you as anything other than the leaders who doomed 1,000 worlds. She exhaled slowly, but I do know that this is the only choice you have left. Fight or fade into nothing. Veen hesitated. You think we can win? Thea didn't hesitate. I know we can. It was the only certainty she had left. She turned, walking back toward the entrance, signaling for her soldiers to follow. She had said what needed to be said. Now the council had to decide what they would be. As she reached the threshold of the chamber, Relin's voice rasped behind her. You called us a warning. She paused but did not turn. He continued, his tone almost hollow. A warning against what? Thea let the silence linger before answering. Against believing that peace can be built on submission. And then she was gone. In the end, she didn't wait for their answer. They had already made their choice. They just didn't know it yet.